Good afternoon. Break out the champagne. We're getting right down to business here, doing it live, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. Mottek On Money, voice of business news here in Los Angeles, live on the air on 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com, and you're on demand. Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, YouTube, all of your favorite podcast platforms. The Dow hitting a record high today, the first high of the year for the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Stocks surging today after Fed Chairman Jerome Powell spoke, suggesting the job market may be weakening enough to require help in the form of a rate cut by the Federal Reserve next month. Stocks cheered. The Dow Jones Industrial Average came in for a closing gain of 846 points, settling at 45,632. That is a record high and the first record high for the Dow this year. The S&P 500 closed up nearly 100 points, just shy of its all-time high at 6,467. And the NASDAQ up nearly 400 today at 21,496, about 300 points below its all-time high, which was achieved just a few weeks ago. The volatility index plunging today by 14%. The yield in the 10-year note also pulling back to 4.26%. The magnificent one, NVIDIA, coming back to life after that big tech sell-off we saw recently. NVIDIA shares up more than $3 today, back to $177 and change. And Intel moving higher again today of $1.30 to $24.80. Looks like the reports indicate Intel's agreed to allow Uncle Sam to take a stake in Intel. The White House watching Fed Chairman Powell's speech closely today. President Trump, meanwhile, continuing to push the Fed and Chairman Powell to lower rates this week. The president put pressure on the Fed Governor Lisa Cook, asking her for her resignation for alleged mortgage fraud. Today, the president said he will fire Cook if she doesn't resign. Some car makers are facing increased tariffs, and the new model year is giving them an excuse to raise prices. We'll talk cars heading into the weekend with Lauren Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast. We'll get a comprehensive update on what happened today with Fed Chairman Jerome Powell's speech in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and where the economy stands. We'll be speaking to prominent economist Kevin KLOWDEN from the Milken Institute. He'll be joining us live later this hour. Apple and Alphabet stocks moved higher today after a Bloomberg report that said Apple is considering using Google's Gemini to power a revamped version of the Siri voice assistant. And it looks like Meta has signed a deal, a $10 billion deal with Alphabet's Google to build out its AI infrastructure. Joining us live now on this record-shattering day for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, one for the history books. Joining us live now, the one and only John NAJARIAN. Dr. J, as he's known on the major financial networks. And on a record day like this, it's not an option to not have John NAJARIAN with us. That's the name of his book, by the way, with his brother Pete. It's not an option. John, thank you very much for coming to the line here to wrap up what turned out to be a record-shattering week.
It's a pleasure. And, yes, it was something that I think Jerome Powell, being the politician that he is, as well as a great economist, decided that his quorum was no longer, of course, in the camp of let's stay pat, let's not cut rates. And so rather than seeing a mutiny, he decided to join them. That's what my read was of what he said today, because, he talked about being, following the data and so forth. And the rest of the members of the Fed, at least now a majority of them, said the data is indicating we need to cut. And he had been staunchly against it until this speech today at Jackson Hole. So that was the catalyst. You're exactly right.
Well, Fed rally, as we say here, and the Dow's been flirting with an all-time high for the last week or so, but did it so today convincingly with a closing jump of more than 800 points. What's your reaction to the Dow finally joining the record party on Wall Street?
Well, the Dow has been rejiggered and reformulated so many times lately that it's not so much an industrial, even though we still call it Dow Jones Industrial Average, DJIA. It really is some of the more popular stocks, but not necessarily. I mean, most of us would say I'd much rather have, for instance, NVIDIA over Intel in the Dow Jones and so forth. And neither one are there right now, but certainly the rise of Intel from the idea that the government would take a stake. That was good for Intel a couple weeks back when that was first discussed. And then they moved on. Mr. Ludnick, the Commerce Secretary, moved on to Micron and others, and they didn't get quite the same lift. But apparently they do have a deal that's coming together with INTC Intel, and that's why the stock is about $6 higher than when it was that the president was going after Mr. Tan, who is the CEO of Intel, for some involvement with a Chinese, more or less, spy mission.
Very interesting. On your line with John Najarian, and you also follow the cryptos and have for quite some time. You have the laser eyes on. We did see Bitcoin just a little over a week ago move to its all-time high above 124,000, pulled back to, around 112 this week, and now it's back up to 116. And look at ETH, as we call it now, Ethereum, above 4,800 all of a sudden after a sell-off this week. And what about the cryptos here?
Well, certainly ETH is benefiting from a lot of these DATs, these digital asset treasuries. In other words, companies that are out there aggressively buying the cryptos, either Bitcoin or Ethereum. Those are the two most popular, but they're not the only ones. There are DATs being set up for a whole host of the top 5 or top 10 of the cryptos. So Solana's right in there as well. And I think that Mr. Tom Lee, who is, of course, the founder of Fundstrat and now the CEO as well, at the same time, he's becoming a mini Musk. He's the CEO of Bitmine Immersion, BMNR, and that stock certainly surging under his leadership, and even just before his leadership when they announced that they were going to be purchasing $5 billion of Ether, which they've already done now, and they're raising $20 million more.
And we see Bitmine Immersion stock moving up nearly $6 today at 53 and change. What about some of the other crypto-related equities? Bullish, for example, which had that big splash in its IPO last week, moving higher today of $1 to 70.82, and Circle and so forth.
Yes, exactly. And some of these are we're likely to see XRP and a host of others getting that similar sort of attention from digital asset investors, some of whom are pretty new to the space, quite frankly, even if they are institutions. Many have, as soon as they made it, as soon as the president passed that bill to let people invest in their 401ks in digital assets, then it was almost Katie bar the door. But as you said, we shot to new all-time highs for Bitcoin and then pulled back fairly substantially, at least a 10 or 11% pullback. But now we're pushing right back through 116. And as you already said accurately, Ether or Ethereum is pushed up above 4,800. And many folks have like a $7,500 target for year end.
You call it ETH also? Is that cool?
I call it ETH. I know some people call, what is the one that has the ETHzilla or whatever? One of the folks that's trying to, catch lightning in a bottle by basically merging Godzilla and Ethereum together. So yeah, I like ETH. I like Bullish. That's an exchange, of course. Bullish is, but there's so many plays that are going to be coming our way over the next quarter for sure, and we're just not even done with the third quarter yet.
Right, and we expand our vocabulary as we go along. Now, do you see those predictions on where Bitcoin might be going? We did hear from the CEO of Coinbase this week, who flat out said he expects Bitcoin to reach 1 million per token by the end of 2030. And then Kathy Wood at ARK also had an astronomical prediction on where Bitcoin could go from here. Where does John Najarian think Bitcoin can go from here?
Well, I don't want to argue with either of those predictions, but I don't usually look out as far as 2030. This year, I do think we could still touch 140, even 150 under the right set of circumstances. But I think a conservative estimate is that over the next 5 years, which they're predicting, I would be more in probably $300 to $370,000 per Bitcoin. I think $1 million's fantastic. It would be wonderful, and I'd love to see it. So I'd love to be wrong in my lame prediction down around 300 or 350. But again, Kathy Woods, Tom Lee, Brad Armstrong. I mean, we're talking about pretty smart folks that have been in the space even longer than I have.
Right. Brian Armstrong, the head of Coinbase, making that $1 million prediction this week. Let me ask you the next question. How low do you think it could go?
Well, again, on a somewhat severe pullback, I think you could see 70s again, a 70 handle. So by that I mean, could it be somewhere between 72 and 78,000 per Bitcoin? I think that's not unreasonable. But right now, I certainly don't see anything that's on the horizon. It would have to be a bit of a shocker to drive it to a level like that. Pulling back to 112 or even 102, that's not so bad, but it would take a lot to drive it below 80,000 per coin, in my opinion.
All right, Ethereum certainly has seen a tremendous rebound this year, just in the last month or so. What about ETH here? Where do you see Ethereum go from here?
Well, I do like the predictions that it goes over 6,000, which isn't really even all that far from a 4,800 level where it is right now. It's trading 48.25 as you and I are on the radio, Frank, and I wouldn't be surprised at all, given the number of firms that are lining up with these, again, treasuries that have a mandate that they draw up for themselves to own as much Ethereum as they can. And there is obviously far more Ethereum out there than there is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a whole different process in terms of how people get rewarded for the work that they do as these miners do. And there are significantly less Bitcoins. So when Brian Armstrong is accurately saying that given that kind of a squeeze that you could see, I think we could see seven figures for Bitcoin. It's because, again, the asset gathers its value by its scarcity. And there's just so many more ETH tokens out there than there are Bitcoin. So I think it's reasonable to assume that we could see 6,000, even 7,000 this year out of Ethereum. But Bitcoin, again, I think it continues to march higher. And there's just an awful lot of institutional support for it right here.
See it tonight, read about it tomorrow, but hear it now on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC, on the air live with John NAJARIAN. What about Solana? What about XRP now at 308? Solana's at 199, and Doge is back to 24 cents.
Yeah, well, again, Doge is the apple of Elon's eye, only because he loves poking fun at all of us. Whether or not he even might be Satoshi Nakamoto, you know, many of us debate that all the time. But I think overall, Solana, certainly XRP, those are a couple, and then TON, T-O-N, is one that I've got my eye on, and I've been accumulating some of that. That's with the Telegraph folks, and I think, you know, depending on how they play it, they could drive that one to significantly higher levels as well.
That's interesting. So anything else getting your attention in the crypto world nowadays?
It'll be great to see, given the president's massive support for crypto, if he can bring a few of the bigger players back to America, all the ones that deserted for Malta or Dubai, or other places where crypto-friendly places like Zug, Switzerland, for instance. I would love to see that happen, because if this indeed is what you and I think it is, Frank, and that is a new technology, not groundbreaking technology, but new use of this blockchain technology to really have, in some cases, almost frictionless trading of credit and so forth, rather than 3% and 4% that MasterCard, Visa, American Express charge. a lot of these stable coins can do it for obviously pennies. And it's just a question of how fast do those other folks change their business model. So that's something I'll be looking for in the coming years as well. But it might not take years. It might just be months.
Yeah, and that's something you raised a really important point. Certainly the banks paying attention to all this was certainly noted on this program quite some time ago that cryptocurrency is not so much a threat to currencies, but to the bank transfer world. Banks have been making a fortune on bank transfers, but with this new technology here in the crypto space, now transfers are done seamlessly, frictionlessly, as you say. And speaking of that, I noticed that one of the major banks, you now have to pay $4 to get a $20 bill out of an ATM nowadays. Looks like the banks are making money elsewhere. What about the bank names here, John? We haven't had a chance to talk about the major players in the banking space, and what do you see ahead there?
Well, I certainly like the major banks, and how can you not? Because they just have significant lessening of competition. Not a fan of that, but nonetheless, there's been a lot of...
Absolutely. Well, I have a feeling one of the major banks trying to interfere with our signal here, John. Go ahead.
Very possibly, Frank. But to your point, though, I probably need to hop because the area of the country that I'm in is not terribly friendly to sell. But I really appreciate being on the show with you, as always, sir.
Thank you very much for doing it on the show here, John Najarian. It's always wonderful to have you with us. Thank you very much for joining us live here. That is John Najarian, co-founder of Market Rebellion, author of It's Not an Option with his brother Pete. Dr. J, as he's known on the major financial networks, where he's a big contributor and, of course, a very valued contributor here for many years on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC. Money continues, 790 KABC, a well-fed rally today with the Dow hitting a record high for the first time this year. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of 846 points, settling at 45,632. The S&P 500 popped 97 points, back to 6,467, just shy of its all-time high. And the NASDAQ rallied up nearly 400 points to 21,496, at two, just below its all-time high. The yield in the 10-year note slipping to 4.26%. The market reacting to the latest comments from Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, suggesting the Fed might lower rates next month. Stocks soaring on his speech in Jackson Hole, Wyoming today, leaving the door open to a September rate cut during his highly anticipated speech at Jackson Hole, Wyoming, the big central bankers conference. That'll be Powell's last one, it looks like. We'll be discussing all this very, very shortly with prominent economist Kevin KLOWDEN, executive director of Milken Institute Finance, based here in Southern California. Taking a look at Intel, it moved up $1.30 today to $24.80. NVIDIA, the magnificent one, finally rebounding this week after a vicious tech sell-off. NVIDIA up more than $3 at the bell at $177 and change. Apple up nearly $3, back to $227 and change. Bullish, that's the one that had that big IPO recently and made a big splash on Wall Street and lived up to its name somewhat today, up $1.02 at $70.82. Bitmine Immersion shares up nearly $6 at $53 and change. Open Door shares of $1.41 at $5.01. Google today moving higher. Alphabet Google shares of more than $6 at $2.06 and change. Checking the cryptos now, Bitcoin roaring back to life, back to 116. It was down to around 112 24 hours ago. Ethereum, ETH, as we've been calling it lately, back above 4,800 at 4,809 here at the moment. XRP at 308, Solana at 199, and Doge at the moment at 24 cents. Turning now to analog gold from digital gold. We see gold moving higher today, up $35.60 at $3,417.20 an ounce. Let's bring up the price of silver here while we have the chance. Silver up 81 cents to $39.39 an ounce. And crude oil futures moving higher, up 25 cents at $63.77 a barrel. And now the latest news on 790 KABC.
YouTube personality Benny Johnson has cracked the code on a new era of newsmaking.
And, we have some major members of the White House team that will be joining the program. I know it makes you uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable. But, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes you just got to dive right in and say, well.
It's a new cultural landscape.
This is the proper messaging. Thank you. Let's rock and roll.
The Benny Show. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
Welcome to NFL Flag.
Are you ready? Yeah! Are you ready? Yeah!
No matter who you are, lace up your cleats, smear on your eye black, step out on the field and chase something. Chase a goal.
Let's get it.
Chase the big time.
Good job, ladies.
Chase rings. Chase gold medals. Chase all of it. It's all up for grabs now. NFL Flag. Chase something. Visit NFLflag.com to find a league and start the chase today.
Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KABC. We're keeping an eye on the tariff situation and how it impacts things at the new car showroom. Looks like some companies are using the opportunity to raise prices, whether tariffs are impacting for real or not. Let's bring in our go-to car expert, Lauren Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast. Lauren Fix, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yeah, there's a lot going on. Some things are not being talked about on the mainstream media, and others are. We are seeing some prices increase for certain brands, such as Audi announced that they're going to increase their prices, where other brands like Hyundai and Kia have said they're going to absorb that difference, and they don't want to increase prices for consumers. So it's really important that if you're looking for a vehicle, that if you're looking for an electric vehicle, you definitely want to buy before the end of September, because that's when that tax credit goes away. And you also, if you want to put an electric charging system in, you want to do that by the end of the year, because then that credit goes away also. And it all adds up, a little here, a little there. But it's what no one's talking about, and I literally found this out about maybe an hour ago, is part of the negotiations with Europe. And there's supposedly a deal in place with the EU, and I haven't had a chance to read it all. But the one thing that caught my attention right away was automotive related. The government wants to make a deal with Europe so that the U.S. and the EU are on the same standards for pollution and for collision, because right now they're not. So what that would do is make Europe match the U.S., which, if it happened, would be a really good thing, because then we could sell vehicles that are built here in the U.S. to Europe. And right now that's one of the biggest challenges.
On there live with our go-to car expert, Lauren Fix. I don't know if you saw that viral video of somebody going through a used car lot the other day and just seeing those eye-popping prices for cars that are years old and high mileage. And, maybe you can give us an update on what you think of new and used car prices nowadays.
Yeah, it is true. Used car prices are up. And what people are looking at is, I can't afford a new car. The average cost of a vehicle has gotten higher. And then, of course, we look at interest rates, which still have not softened. And I know you cover that, but it's still one of those things that consumers, they're very upset because they don't know what to do. And so they start thinking, I'll just go with a used vehicle, something maybe a certified pre-owned, but even those prices are higher. And the part of that is because the cars that are being traded in that are 3 or 4 years old, at the time, car brands got a little greedy and they increased the prices. And if you remember that, when we had the chip shortage, we covered that quite a bit. And a lot of those vehicles were fully loaded. So that means when it's time to sell them 3 years down the road, and I did call this out, 3 years down the road, I knew there'd be a problem. Cars are more expensive because there's more options on them. And of course, manufacturers, used car lots, anyone who's selling a car is expecting more money. Prices will not go back to where they were when the chip shortage happened. That's a real odd situation. However, what we are noticing is the cost of new cars are just unobtainable. Now, we're hoping that with some of the changes with the big, beautiful bill, with the EPA, which I actually just spoke at the EPA, they did a hearing, and I was given some time to talk about some of the rule changes that Lee Zeldin's putting in place. All of that could make prices more reasonable, because car brands are burdened with all these unelected bureaucrats saying, this is what we want you to build. And car manufacturers are saying, we'll build it. It's going to cost us money. We have to pass that along. In addition to that, the cars aren't aren't as much fun to drive. They all start to look like potatoes on wheels, and people kind of want some personality in their vehicles. And so I think with the EPA lifting some of the regulations that will maybe not work in California, we're still waiting for that because we know that Gavin Newsom will push back. But once they rescind the endangerment finding, I think that's going to make offer cars more reasonable to consumers.
All right. Looks like there's a bit of a ray of sunshine on the financing side. We'll be discussing some of this shortly with prominent economist Kevin KLOWDEN, who'll be joining us, I hope, very, very soon here. What about the fact that the Fed has signaled we're going to be seeing a lower interest rate next month? That could potentially impact consumer loans as well as other business loans and all sorts of loans if the Fed funds rate comes down by a quarter percentage point. How is auto financing looking these days, and what kind of good and bad deals are out there?
There are quite a few good deals, but I am hoping for more than a quarter point. I think that's not enough. We need to do at least a half a point in order to get consumers to start saying, you know what, I think I can afford this vehicle now. And we've been burdened by this for such a long time. It seems political to me, although that I'm not in a position to make those type of statements typically. But as far as for consumers, I always say shop around. End of the month, we're getting close to the end of the month. So next week, when it's just that last week of August, that's coming into September. That means all the 2026 models start to show up. We're already test driving them and reviewing them. I review them all on Car Smarts on YouTube for car reviews. My news is on Car Coach Reports. But I always tell people, if you're thinking you want something, end of the month is always best. And as the new models come in, there are 2025s and even 24s that are sitting in the lot that are brand new, that didn't sell. Take a look at those. Don't overlook those because there might be some good deals, especially if interest rates drop. Then it's really going to be crazy. It's going to be just like a feeding frenzy again.
On the You're Live with Lauren Fix. And what about EVs and any deals that are catching your attention for those that do want to go electric now?
Oh, yeah, there's a ton of deals. So if you're thinking about an electric vehicle, now is the time. I know that some of the prices have softened and they're very negotiable at Ford with their truck as well as with their Mach-E. I know that Hyundai, of course, has their Kona, which is their entry-level car. They've got quite a few, the Ioniq line as well with Hyundai. So I would absolutely go take one for a test drive. If it works for you, maybe it's a second car. That might work perfectly in your situation. Everyone's different. If that works for you, there are lots of incentives. But before you make any offers, go to the manufacturer's website, not the dealer, the manufacturer. And the manufacturer has incentives on there right now. So you can go and look it up, decide on 2 or 3 brands, test drive 2 or 3 brands, and get your best deal. And even though the salesperson might say, no, that's the best price, if you're driving a different brand or the exact same brand, you should ask for a loyalty discount if you're staying with Toyota, for example, or if you're switching from Toyota to Honda, ask for what's called a conquest discount. Even on an electric vehicle, you're talking about a minimum of $1,000. That's an additional a price cut off of what you're seeing now. If they say that's not the case, or we don't know what you're talking about, ask for the sales manager because that money goes to the dealer if you, the customer, don't get it. And of course, they'd like to have it, but some dealers are more honest than others, so it's important that you shop around. And if you still are not happy, maybe it's the only brand in your area, go online, talk to a dealer out of state. They'll deliver the vehicle to you. They want your business. Every dealer does.
All right, and certainly the world has changed related to EVs. What about the winners and losers in all of this? Lauren Fix, obviously Tesla's still riding high, but are some of these companies going to be going away anytime soon?
Well, there's a lot of struggles. It's a good question. Rivian and Lucid are struggling. They have money coming in from their investors. But unfortunately, in this case, if the tax credit goes away, all the electric vehicle brands are going to start making less and less of them and making them based on demand. So there's a high demand for entry-level vehicles like a Kona EV or the Chevy Bolt, which is coming back. There's going to be demand for that because it's a small, reasonably priced car. The more expensive vehicles like a Hummer EV, they're just unobtainable for your average person. And they know that. They thought that we were going to go all EV. Thank goodness that has been changed permanently. And it cannot come back into play, even though Gavin Newsom is trying everything he can to make it all EV in California. It doesn't make sense. It won't happen, although there's a lot of things happen like that with a governor or a policymaker makes a statement and then they undo it. I think it's important to be careful the brands that you buy. Tesla is not going anywhere. They still own over 60% of the marketplace. There is a new deal going on right now with leasing of Teslas, used Teslas as well. And since he is his own bank, Elon Musk is his own bank when it comes to leases, unlike car brands where you go through the Ford Financial or General Motors Financial, you will go through Tesla Financial, and that's owned by him. And so they're now offering lease deals on used Tesla. So if you're looking for a deal on an EV, that might be your best bet.
Terrific, Lauren. Thank you very much for taking the call here. We wish you a great weekend and look forward to seeing you when you come out here to the Los Angeles area. That is Lauren Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast, live here on Mottek On Money, 790 KBC.
Former U.S. Navy SEAL Sean Ryan captures real stories about sacrifice and strength.
My biggest fear wasn't death. My biggest fear was nobody will remember me.
That motivates a lot of people.
It just made me feel invincible.
Open the steel door and just... They were all convinced, I think, that they were about to die.
This rush of stress comes over me because now it's soul time.
All of a sudden, I'm saying, what is really important?
Let us reveal the truth of ourselves.
That's it.
The Sean Ryan Show. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
Mottek On Money continued, 790 KBC. Back to our top story. The Dow hitting a record high close today for the first time this year, up 180, make that 846 points at 45,632. The S&P 500 up nearly 100, just shy of its record high at 6,467. And the NASDAQ popped nearly 400 at 21,496. That, too, close to its all-time high hit just recently. All this in reaction to the Fed Chairman Jerome Powell's speech indicating the Fed could cut rates next month. This was the big event of the week, the Fed Chairman's speech at the Central Bankers Conference in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Joining us live now, prominent Los Angeles area economist Kevin Clouden, Executive Director of Milken Institute Finance, based right here in Southern California. Kevin Clouden, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
My pleasure, Frank, and greetings to everyone.
Thank you so much for being with us here. We certainly saw an impressive Wall Street reaction to the Fed Chairman's comments. What's your reaction and what's your read on the economy here?
Well, there are some very good things if the Fed Chairman feels like he can consciously go in, have a meeting, and say, look, it's time to lower rates. That means that the inflationary pressures that he's clearly been worried about for some time are not likely to overwhelm. It does mean that we could be in a position where a lot of the concerns that have been carried over on the higher interest rates and how they've tied into the bond market, how they've tied into the housing market, hopefully that means that there can be some easing, and that obviously the president and various others will be able to look at this and take a step back and breathe a bit of a sigh of relief.
On there live with economist Kevin Clouden, and certainly the Wall Street reaction was impressive. The Dow finally joining the record high party here. I know you keep track of all things in the world of finance, but it certainly turned out to be a big week.
It certainly is. I think that there's been a lot of noise and a lot of concern about the Fed's independence, and I think everybody doesn't want a conflict between the White House and the Federal Reserve. I mean, if you are aware in a certain amount of history, one of the things that was actually considered to be really important to the rise of the pound in the British financial sector back in the 80s and 90s after the big bang of deregulation was also the fact that the British had used to have a politicized Bank of England, that the Prime Minister would notoriously manipulate interest rates regardless of party before elections. And when that became independent, it actually massively strengthened the British financial system and the investments in it. People come to the United States because they want that trusted independence, but they also want to know that the Federal Reserve is tied into what they're worried about. And if the Fed is actively saying, hey, we now have a reason that enough pressures have gone off or anything like that in terms of tariff threats, in terms of other interest rate increases, and like everything that all of that's been incorporated into the market, hey, we can now lower interest rates and we can take some of that pressure off the system.
All right, we have the ongoing firestorm recovery here. I know you're working closely with the LA Area Chamber and, of course, at the Milken Institute, making calculations here as to the enormous cost of this rebuilding effort, and it's been a slow and painful process. Can you give us an update on what you're seeing here in the Los Angeles area, here in the Palisades, Malibu, as well as in Altadena?
Well, I actually put up a piece that went up on the Milken Institute website today, but officially gets published on Monday, talking a bit about those reflections, because the fact that I've been talking not only with people here and around Los Angeles, but also from the Institute standpoint, where we've been particularly focused on ways that we can help with recovery tools. And one of the things we realize is, of course, that the initial assessment and costs are now significantly higher, because of course they are, because as people get a real understanding of the damage, about how long it takes to recover, about how much it takes to execute, that we're seeing a lot more. The other thing that was really sad, that I don't know how much coverage it got, is that the estimates of the number of people who died in the fires has gone up considerably. And that, of course, is incredibly distressing. But it also means, both in terms of the recovery and the way we're rebuilding, that we really need to be smart about it and to be able to make resilient rebuilding and sustainable rebuilding so that this doesn't happen again, so that you don't have homes that essentially become the kindling the way that wildfires haven't been in the past, so that families and communities aren't as vulnerable, and that we can create a cohesive system that goes across political boundaries, that goes across economic boundaries, and be able to pull together to do what should be not just a model for California, but for the country in terms of how we do rebuilding right.
And it seems Rick Caruso's Steadfast LA effort appears to be leading the recovery effort at this point. Is there some sort of other master plan for the rebuilding effort at this point? Well,
the problem is there isn't one clear master plan. Rick Caruso has been very out front, and he's been, absolutely championing, taking, ironically, for a man who, ran diligently for mayor, has been taking advantage of the fact that he's coming from the private sector side. It's actually letting him pull some of the levers, both as being somebody who's obviously incredibly familiar with construction, but also, of course, his ties to USC, his ties to charitable foundations, to be able to be effective in a way that deals with, in some ways, the problems that we've been seeing in the morass of political boundary issues. The fact that Altadena is county, that it isn't actually incorporated, the fact that the city of LA, to be horribly blunt, the mayor's office is limited by the system that's there, that is basically was put in place decades ago to kind of kneecap some of the authority the mayor actually has. And so we really do need the city, the county, the private sector, the foundations to be working together. And Rick Caruso has really much been out in front of it, but he's not doing it on his own. The LAEDC isn't doing it on its own. And we really need multiple leaders and to not just focus on the first few months, because now that we've gotten past that first part, some of the really hardest work, which is getting people's homes fully rebuilt, getting the communities active again. I mean, if you've gone...
Absolutely. Kevin Clouden, appreciate it. Wish we had more time. We'll have to stop there, but let's do this again very, very soon. That is prominent economist Kevin Clouden, Executive Director of Milken Institute Finance, based here in Southern California. Live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
YouTube personality Benny Johnson has cracked the code on a new era of newsmaking.
Very controversial, very strong opinions. A person who speaks truth fearlessly, breaking for nobody.
It's a new cultural landscape.
We're not trying to politicize this. People are primed now, and forgive me, dude, it is what it is. Here's what's going on in your country, bro.
The Benny Show.
Get ready if this is something that you needed to put a little pep in your step. No? Yeah? Okay.
Follow and listen on your favorite platform.